So shalom, my friends, and shalom, my enemies, and shalom to all of you everywhere. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon. And what a delight, how much fun we're going to have today, because we have with us a Maryland citizen and denizen. Let me make sure you've got to unmute your mic there, but once you do that, we will be live with MELVIN G. Mintz of Pikesville, Maryland, my friends. So he's smiling, he's good, it's good to see you. I wish you, first of all, a very good and zissing Shabbos. Let me introduce you properly here, or improperly as the case may be. Former Baltimore City Councilman, who was also in the military, also a former physical therapist. So if you could maybe look at this shoulder later, that would really be helpful. And he has been a organ specialist. He now lives in Pikesville, Maryland. Won't you please welcome to the neighborhood, MELVIN G. Mintz. Shalom, MELVIN.
Shalom, Rabbi. Good to meet you. Pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure to be with you on this Shabbos too. So let me ask you, MELVIN, how long have you lived in Pikesville, Maryland?
I've lived in Pikesville since 1975.
So was it rural back then? Was there almost nothing and they just built it? Or what was it like?
Not when I moved into Pikesville. It was not rural. It was a suburban village with a lot of residential around it, a commercial core along what's called Reisterstown Road. Kind of an old-fashioned commercial village in the suburbs of Baltimore City. This was in Baltimore County. I was a member, as you said, but of the Baltimore County Council. It's different than the City Council.
Oops! I already made a mistake today.
You didn't make a mistake. You didn't make a mistake. That's why they put erasers on pencils, Rabbi.
So here, let me ask you a question though. What brought you? Have you always been a Marylander? Or?
Yes, I was born in Baltimore City.
Oh yeah.
And then when married, moved out to the county in Pikesville.
So you've chosen over your life to live and stay in Baltimore County and environs, Baltimore City and Baltimore. What do you love about, why Maryland? Because someone with your life would have moved, you were in the Army. Why this particular state?
Well, it's predominantly family. That's where my family raised me, and my mom and pop raised me in Baltimore City. So I've always been there, and my wife is from Baltimore City as well. So we stayed put.
So let me ask, how Jewish were you raised, and how Jewish are you now?
It's mostly a cultural thing, Rabbi. Was raised to continue the traditions and the observances to some degree of my family. And it's no great religious epiphany that occasioned that, but I consider myself a committed Jew.
Yes, I'm a Jew, simply committed. So that's a little bit.
Could have fooled me, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. So do you are you a Yom Kippur Jew? Like you? That's the one.
Yes, I very much. What's the word I want to use? Observe Yom Kippur very assiduously. I fast the 24 hours, and God willing, I'm still able to do that.
See,
and
25 hours. That's the problem. In America, you're supposed to give that extra hour. I'm like, no, I gotta eat. After
24 is good enough. I think you'll understand. It's okay.
Yeah. What about Passover? Do you do a Seder? Do you go to a Seder?
Well, to lack of divulging all my religious observances, I do keep Passover to a certain degree. I do not eat any bread or pasta, that kind of thing. And, it reminds me of an old joke about when God said you should keep kosher. And Moses said, I got it, Rabbi, I got it. So what we do is we put the meat over here on one side and we put the milk over here on the other side. God said, no, Moses, you don't understand. You shall not eat the meat of the child bathed in the milk of the mother. And Moses said, I got it. So you cook the meat first, and then you put the milk over here on the other side. Moses, listen to me. You shall not eat the meat of the child bathed in the milk of the mother. And Moses said, oh, I got it, God. I got it, God. So you dig a hole and you put the meat in one hole. When you get rid of it and you put the milk in, Moses, do whatever the hell you want. And that's why we have all these different ways of observing Pesach.
That's not so much a joke as more of a parable, like a modern rabbi would say. This is why Orthodox.
Use it.
Yeah.
Use it, Rabbi. It's good. It's all right.
I'll steal, invariably steal from anywhere that I can, possibly. So, but let me ask you, also in terms of, I know Pikesville and places like Owings Mills and Reisterstown are rather Jewish areas. How would you say that it's a fairly large population, or just comparatively, because Jews are only 2% of the population to begin with?
Yeah. Comparatively is the accurate description, Rabbi. It used to be a lot more concentrated in Pikesville. Perhaps in my day back then, it may have been 40 or so % Jewish.
Wow.
I would guess now it's down to about 15 or so, 20, something in that neighborhood, just a guess.
There goes the neighborhood, yeah.
Well, now just the dispersion of everybody going to different environs. It's not like the old days where you grew up in one little neighborhood and you stayed there throughout generations.
But you stayed.
Well, I stayed in the general vicinity, but one of the motivations, speaking of Jewishness, one of the motivations for me getting in public life was my observation of our people in Baltimore, starting out in what's called South Baltimore, in the old row houses and very deep in the city. And then another generation moved a little further north and stayed there in the city. And then another generation or so moved a little further north in the city. And then another generation or so moved to Pikesville. And my observation led me to a motivation to get involved in public life, to try to make that one last stop, Pikesville, the kind of last stop. It's enough leapfrogging over each neighborhood to get to somewhere for whatever reason, to another locale. And so that was one of my motivations for getting in public life, was to try to sustain that hometown of Pikesville for more generations.
So this is even before the current Pikesville, and wow, there's a lot of feedback on that speaking there, but this is before the current Thousand Friends of Pikesville thing. This is when you first became a county council person.
Interested in getting involved in public life and activities. That's what was one of my motivations. And in fact, when I did get into the county council, one of the things I'm most proud of is the very first revitalization plan for the hometown of Pikesville that I adopted in the late 80s, early 90s. And it led to it brought a bit new investment into this old established commercial core and sustained its viability for another generation, which I'm very proud of.
So in other words, you could point to saying, oh, that group of restaurants, that business came here, this created 40 jobs or something like that, that whole sort of thing, right?
Yes, that's about the size of it, yeah.
So,
and I'm very proud of it.
Did you like politics, or was it more when you got through, your hands felt dirty, even though you accomplished a lot?
So it depends on how deep in history you want to go with me. So it all started, Rabbi, in a little town in Iranian Russia.
That's going back. All right, Iranian Russia.
My grandfather was the mayor of that little shtetl.
Wow.
And he was very popular. And then the Russian Revolution happened, etc. More pogroms happened. And so the family, no longer an important big shot in Iranian Russia, decided to leave for America. And one of my first cousins, who was the son of my mother's sister, became a state senator.
Here.
And I was here, yes. And I was a young boy, so I was enamored and thrilled that my first cousin, I'm so proud of him, became a state senator. And so in the blood is what it's about. And seeing my first cousin and his success and his service drew me to politics.
Do you regret it? Or was
No, not at all. So what I considered it, people don't know about Baltimore County, but I represented about 100,000 people on a county council that was made up of 6 other members, all representing 100,000 people. Baltimore County does not have an incorporated town in it. Baltimore City is completely separate. It's very unique. There's only 3 places in the whole country like it. There is no incorporated town. There's no Tacoma Park in Baltimore County. Name me a town somewhere that you know of. They have a town council. So each council member thus becomes almost the mayor of their little district in Baltimore County. So there's a lot of ability to influence events as a result of that structure.
I mean, did you have to do, not have to, but did you get to do ribbon cuttings and things?
Oh yeah. That was one of the more enjoyable things. And but
Yeah.
back to the
right.
service. Back to the service.
Yeah.
I always regarded it as a glorious burden. You got a lot of it. You got a lot of attention, and you went to a lot of ribbon cuttings, and people patted you on the back. But there was a lot of stress.
How many silly cook-offs? How many pies did you have to taste, kosher or not? Yeah, that kind of thing.
There was a lot of hot dogs, a lot of corned beef sandwiches.
Oh, hey, you know, I'm in. I'm getting into politics. Right? If I get free corned beef, I'm in.
You kidding me? Are you kidding me?
If they make it pastrami, I'll be a lifelong. But you couldn't get me out of office at that point.
So we can bribe you with a pastrami sandwich. Is that right,
bribe me
Councilman?
With a pastrami sandwich. I'm telling you. We're talking with MELVIN G, ladies and gentlemen. It does occur to me, I've totally blanked on this, but I don't know if this is true or not. But earlier, or a few years ago on this program, we had a broadcaster by the name of Elliot Mintz. Have you ever heard of him? Any relation to him?
Not that I know of. There was an old actor a million years ago, and this is way back in the day. There was a television show called, I think, The Goldbergs.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a Molly Goldberg.
Yeah.
And there was an actor, I think he was like the grandfather. His name was, I don't think it was Elliot Mintz. Forgot his name. It was something Mintz. And we always called him Uncle Irv or whatever his name was.
Even though he's not.
No, not that we know of.
What's your name, your family name, when they were in Oriri in Russia?
We don't know. We don't. Yeah. Well, the Iranian part was my mother's side, Saperstein. My father's name, Mintz. They were from Białystok, Poland. Oh. They weren't quite so famous, but I think there was a rabbi of Mintz in Białystok, and he came to Cleveland way back in the day. So.
I think his name was Mintz. That was his actual name.
No, that's a good tip. So what we did, rabbis, when we ran for county council, I handed out breath mints, and my slogan was "Freshen up government with mints."
Boom! Boom! I love this man. He's got the humor. He's got the Jewishness. He's got the good ideas. So, 40-something years ago, you were on the council to help revitalize Pikesville. But now, why do you have to revitalize Pikesville again? What's missing?
Okay, that's what brings us to kind of today. And we accomplished a lot of things in my service on the county council while I was in office for those 8 years from 86 to 94. And again, as I said, established the very first revitalization plan in all of Baltimore County, which led to a significant amount of success. So I had lunch about 12 or 13 years ago with an old colleague, and we were shooting the breeze one day over lunch. And I contended back in 2012 to this fellow, we need a new revitalization plan. We haven't had one for 2 decades in Pikesville. And so this guy challenged Mel Mintz very effectively, but said, "You did it once, Mel, do it again." And so that's all I needed to challenge me to try to effectuate a new revitalization plan. So we began that process that was needed in 2012. And long story short, finally accomplished a very historic revitalization plan that was adopted by the county council. Believe it or not, took 9 years of work to get the county council in Baltimore County to adopt a new revitalization plan for Pikesville.
Well, how much does something like that cost? Is it 2 million? Is it 10 million? I mean, what does it mean? What?
Good question. So the cost of creating and drafting the plan is virtually minimal. It's just a plan.
Well, yeah.
The cost of doing it is a different story. It's very difficult to place a number on it. There are about a dozen or so what I call action items in this plan, and they all have each a kind of a guess that price tag, upwards of maybe $50 million altogether.
Yeah, I'm Jewish. I aim low, but $50 million is like yowza. What's the most?
So imagine it took 9 years to
by the
devise.
time that was over, you had to revitalize the revitalization plan. Because what was there? I think we need to add more Wi-Fi everywhere because we weren't thinking of that.
We kept it fluid enough so that it can be adjusted rather easily, and there's a myriad of elements in that revitalization plan that are in the beginning stages of being implemented.
So we're thinking 5-10 years to.
I would say that, Rabbi, we've already accomplished some small things. And
like what?
Well, one of the first elements, or one of the main elements of this revitalization plan, and I don't want to get too esoteric in description of properties in Pikesville, but there's an old abandoned National Guard armory of 14 acres that was established in 1903. It was vacated completely by the state's National Guard about 2014 or 15. We saw this as an opportunity for redevelopment along the main street of Pikesville. And we outlined a concept to reuse that 14-acre historically designated property, since it was established in 1903, to become what's called focused on artwork, artists, studios, galleries, recreation, and other community and commercial uses, to attempt to achieve a magnet for folks to come back to Pikesville commercial district in this now internet challenged commercial environment where people do all their shopping at home on their keyboard. And it needs an attraction. The artwork and the artist galleries and studios has been a successful model throughout the country to attract new commercial development.
I mean, there's only in Manhattan, in New York, there's the Park Avenue Armory, and it's turned into an off-Broadway theater at this point.
Is that right? Well, similar kind of concept. And my observation throughout, this geek's attention to land use and redevelopment has seen that the only two ways to revitalize an older established commercial core in today's environment is either with waterfront or with artwork. It's the only two ways it's ever been accomplished.
Well, actually, no.
Since we don't have waterfront, that leaves us with artists. Actually,
not necessarily, because they revitalized Lower Denver, Lodo, when Hickenlooper was there as the governor. And he had a brewery. It was the only thing down there. He opened this giant restaurant/brewery, and it was so popular that then the art galleries came, and then the other things came. So that's must
establish a critical enough mass of attraction for the foot traffic to encourage other redevelopment efforts. Because that's what it's all about. So while people are strolling around, viewing the artwork and the artist studios and the artist galleries, perhaps they'll buy a hamburger at the little deli next door, and that's the whole concept.
And then they'll walk around, and then they may spend some money here or some time there.
So what we tried to convince our colleagues in Baltimore County of a Yiddish word that there's almost no translation for, is while they're schmying around.
Schmying around? I haven't heard that in schmy. They just schmy around.
You tell me the English translation for schmying.
Wander.
Wander. What do you do when you wander? You wander, you don't do anything, but you schmy.
But that's what you and can you make it pedestrian? Because
Yes, that's
in New York,
in modern planning principles, as opposed to what had happened since the 1950s of everything being auto-centric. And in New York, you're familiar with Robert Moses.
oh well, yeah, yeah.
Robert Moses was the king of making everything auto-centric. It's practically ruined every town because there was no pedestrian-friendly aspect to all of it. And so what we endeavor to do is try to make this older, established commercial state road, Reisterstown Road, into more of a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere so that there can be incentivized schmying.
Yes. Well, that was the idea when they turned even 47th and 40 or 44th Street.
Yeah, I'm not familiar too much with it. Mm-hmm.
You know, they took away traffic lanes, which the cab
Right.
drivers were screaming about, but they had places where you could just schmy from place. I mean, I don't think New York ever was hurt so much by it, but
Yeah, there's so much population. There's
Yeah.
so much population in the city that it's almost a fact. What happened is his model in Long Island, Robert Moses, was copied throughout the country. Everything's a grand boulevard and everything is low slung and low density, and you can't get there from here unless you drive.
So you want to change that.
Yeah, and we're in the process of that. So the armory is one of the first ingredients, and there's several other items in the plan that we're endeavoring to try to effectuate.
Now let me ask you. You keep talking about the armory, but you yourself were in the army, right? Wait, what was that? You weren't in a war, or you weren't overseas or anything.
Well, I was in the army from after I graduated physical therapy school from 1968 to 1970, and was stationed at Walter Reade Hospital in Washington, D.C. And I was a physical therapist there, treating the wounded coming back from Vietnam. And I am certain, upon reflection, that if everybody in this nation would have taken a tour of Walter Reade Hospital, that war would have been ended in 6 months. What was there was a tragedy. You saw so many young men with their heads shot up and their legs shot off for nothing. So my experience in Walter Reade in physical therapy was a great advantage to me in learning about folks and physical therapy practice. And then when I got out of the Army in 1970, established my own physical therapy practice in Baltimore.
Let me ask you though, were you ever afraid that they would send you to Vietnam, or you knew, no, I'm going to be at least.
No, that's okay. So it was known that physical therapists could be of very little help in the battlefield. It was more afterwards. So that was not a fear. But in my junior year of college, I enlisted to be gotten into the military upon my graduation. And there was a special program that allowed one to do that. If you signed up early, you wouldn't be drafted into the Army without the specialty that I would have as a physical therapist.
So after your 4-year degree, and after the moment you got your degree, they could have drafted you. I thought the whole point was
without that sign up, I could have been drafted and sent anywhere without my physical therapy credentials to allow me to go in as an officer and theoretically be stationed stateside. And fortunately, it was close to home, and Walter Reade was a glorious medical institution, and learned a lot there.
So let me also ask you, because I was a little surprised that you had a degree, a Bachelor of Science in physical therapy. It didn't occur to me that they were even teaching that as a degree thing all those years ago. We feel like it's a word from like 20, 30 years ago. Well,
it's interesting. The history of physical therapy profession started almost predominantly during the polio epidemic of the 50s. And there was such a need, and the physical therapists were such help with those patients, those polio patients, that the physical therapists who were nascent profession gained much more credibility and much more support, much more interest. And I entered physical therapy school in 1964. And so I was starting into that new wave of physical therapists.
And you did that for about 30 years, as you said. You opened a private practice after you 1970. How has the discipline of physical therapy changed from the 60s, 70s till
Well, you
90s?
mentioned that I had a bachelor's degree,
Sure.
and around, I'm going to guess, the late 90s, there became almost a requirement that one must have a doctorate degree in physical therapy. I was grandfathered, of course, after being in practice for so many years, and continued to take continuing education credentials in the meantime. So that's one thing that has changed, is the educational requirement has increased dramatically. The practice of physical therapy has become much more sophisticated. I'm no longer in practice. I left my practice about 15, 20 years ago. It's become much more sophisticated, of course, with more research into the effects of exercise, the effects of certain modalities, the effects of what's called a technique called myofascial release. That's a new technique that kind of combines elements of manipulation and some kinds of deep massage in a certain technique. I won't go into the details. Yeah, we won't go there. Rabbi. It's a family show. It's a family show, Rabbi.
No, he isn't, but okay. So do you keep on top of things, even though you've been out of the practice for 15 years? You still kind of...
No, pretty much. I've left the practice of physical therapy. And as a matter of fact, I've left the practice of politics when in 1994, I ran for county executive, which is the head of the entire county. And I ran for county executive unsuccessfully when the voters decided to tell me, in their infinite wisdom, to go back and practice physical therapy.
That was best. Stupid.
Don't call them names. Don't call them names. They were my constituents.
Well, they not anymore.
But they had great wisdom.
Who beat you? Who?
A guy named. So we saw the council members, myself and the eventual councilman, county executive Dutch Rupersberger, who became a congressman eventually. And we saw that the incumbent county executive was a Republican and was very vulnerable for his reelection. So we both had sat there on the council for 8 years and both thought we were the best suited to be the next county executive in light of this weakness by the incumbent county executive. So we both couldn't talk each other out of running. So we ran against each other, and only one guy can win.
So, and did you throw your support behind him and say, Dutch, good luck to you? I'm here to help you if you need me.
It took a while. It took a while to get over the hurt, but we eventually supported Dutch in all his efforts.
And all through this time, though, you could fall back on, because I always wonder about politicians who mount these expensive campaigns and they spend their whole weeks and weeks and weeks of all their time, but at least then you could fall back on physical therapy again to support your family. You have wife and kids, you said?
So the wife and I had one son, and they were all very supportive, involved in the campaigns, and they understood it all, or most of it, not all of it, because it is Michigan, totally Michigan. There's only two motivations for people to get involved in elective office. Either they're crazy or they're venal and they want to make money out of it. So I can assure you, and you don't know me, but I am not venal and I didn't make a nickel out of this. So the obvious conclusion is Michigan.
Which is what we now I heard, and I'm hoping this is not true, I heard a past tense in there. You said you had or have a son?
Have a son. Sorry, you may have heard. You're incorrect. Yeah, he's wonderful, and we have 3 grandchildren with him, and they're all fantastic. And Jocelyn, Aaron. Wait a minute. Jocelyn, Aaron, and Ezra.
or two are circumcised. This is good. Jocelyn, click, click. And what does your wife do? What do you know? Every Jewish man has a long-suffering wife. What did she suffer with?
So she was professionally what's called a vocational rehabilitation consultant. She tried to help people who were injured on their job get back to work or get a settlement. And then she got involved in counseling for divorced clients who were being divorced, and for economic reasons, they had to settle on some kind of financial arrangement with their divorced spouse. And she would testify as the employability of one divorced spouse or the other in terms of arriving at a settlement. So she was involved professionally in her career, and she made sacrifices to put up with my Michigan. But she found time.
So
and we had the one son who was very involved.
I'm sorry. How did you meet? Yeah.
So in college, a friend of mine who was I attended University of Maryland, and a friend of mine who attended a school called the University of Baltimore had a classmate, female, and he knew I was available and she was available, and he hooked us up on a blind date. And we went to Georgetown on our first date, Georgetown, DC, and we went to a place called the Bayou, and it was a nightclub dance place. And in DC, you could drink at 18. So we had beers and danced, and we hit it off. And she says, when she went home from that first date, and the mother asked her, well, how was your date, darling? She said, it was okay, but I'm going to marry him.
It's just all right.
It was okay. She said, it was okay, but I'm going to marry him.
He'll be a good provider.
Yeah, whatever.
He's a little mishuggah, so he's probably going to go into politics. I can't tell. But
no, she had no indication of that at that time.
And he'll be a physical therapist, so if I ever have a leg, my knee hurts.
And I helped her out a couple of times. She paid me. It was good.
Now, the other question that I want to ask you about, because also later in life you were in a banking sort of thing. Now, I've heard so many things, good and bad, about reverse mortgages, that they're not per se a scam, but that ultimately they're the worst case scenario if you have a house or something. But you used to do.
So Rabbi, my whole endeavor has always been about honorability and helping people. And so after I left physical therapy, I was looking for something to keep myself occupied, do something good for folks, and make a buck or two.
Damn right.
So this reverse mortgage was exposed to me, and it started, I think, in the 70s by a former congressman named Jack Kemp.
Oh, yeah.
He was a Republican congressman, and he came up with this idea that he gleaned from Europe about a reverse mortgage, in that if you own your own home and you're 62 years of age or older, and you want to stay in your own home, but you're having trouble meeting ends, what you do is borrow money from your house, the value of your house, before you sell it. And you're able to meet your needs financially and still stay in your house. The house you love that you built from a long time ago, and your family's there and you love it. You don't want to leave, but you just can't quite make ends meet. So what this allows you to do is take a certain percentage in a loan from the value of the house and meet your needs. And at the end of the stream, when both spouses leave that house that has a reverse mortgage on it, the reverse mortgage must be satisfied. So for example, if you took a reverse and got $50,000, just to use that as an example, 20 years later, both spouses depart the house, and now the reverse is worth $100,000 to pay back. The house gets resold, no matter what the house sells for. If it sells for $220,000, the estate gets the extra. If the house sells for $1, an insurance program set up in the beginning pays the entire balance to the bank. So the estate is left with no debt.
Oh.
And you don't have to, and the homeowners do not have to leave the house. They don't have to sell it if they don't wish. They stay in the house and they live in the house mortgage free until they dispose of the house. And typically that's when they pass away, and the estate, the kids sell the house, whatever proceeds go, and it satisfies the outstanding loan of the reverse mortgage. And that's that.
So it doesn't sound so.
So it helps people meet.
Yeah.
There was a lot of scams in the very beginning because the government didn't take control, and there wasn't that insurance pool created. So then Jack Kemp got involved a little later and created this insurance pool, so that, again, it's tough to explain without numbers.
Right.
So if the house is worth $100,000, the couple gets $50,000. There is another additional, let's say, $2,000 premium out of that 50, but it's actually 52. So it gets to the homeowner at 50. 2,000 is taken out of that, put in an insurance pool. And so that insurance pool is paid by everybody who takes a reverse mortgage out.
Like Social
So
Security.
that is correct. That insurance pool continues to gain interest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that when homeowner A passes on, that insurance pool picks up the difference. And so forth, multiplied times millions of instances where these reverse mortgages occur.
What happens if the house is handed down? It doesn't just go to the bank, or does it?
Well, it can be handed down to the estate, to the sons and daughters, but that reverse mortgage must be paid back. So that's why the typical is the house is sold. Now that is the disadvantage. It can be passed down, but the reverse mortgage, the lien,
is also
has
paid.
to be paid.
Right. So if you're selling if the kids have the house and they sell it or are getting a bad time, and the house is worth less or whatever, they still have to pay off whatever.
No, if they sell the house, the kids sell the house, and the house is worth $100,000, but the reverse mortgage owed is $110,000, the kids don't have to come up with the 10. The insurance pool picks up the 10. So the worst that the kids come up with is 0.
Right. So everything goes to pay off, with nothing over it, nothing beyond what they get.
Well, if it is over, again, using that example, if it's owed $100,000, but the house gets sold for $110,000, the kids get the $10,000.
All right. So it sounds pretty okay. It sounds like
it's a help for folks to get through their difficulties without burdening the kids. That's what it's about.
But why not do a second mortgage instead?
Economically, you might, depends on if you can afford to carry the second mortgage, because that involves a payment. A reverse mortgage, there's no payment while it's in effect. So the mortgage that used to cost the homeowner $1,000 a month to meet the principal and interest is gone.
Right. You just live. You just live, and you don't really worry about it until the house is sold or whatever or
disposed of. Right.
Yeah. All right. Wow. I was just always curious about this, because you hear the good.
There's still a few too many bad actors. There used to be many more bad actors, as so many things are.
Have you ever seen me on stage?
Show business. I tell you, Rabbi, show business. Show business is everything.
My tevya is like, God,
would it spoil some vast eternal plan?
Every Jew knows Fiddler on the Road. Every Jew. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have had such a fun time chatting with MELVIN G. Mintz. Let me have you remind people, because if people are in Baltimore or environs, or certainly in and around Pikesville, how do they find out about 1,000 Friends of Pikesville if they want to get involved, if they want to be part of this revitalization?
Well, I'll give you a couple of contacts, or few. It's Pikesville, 1000friendsofpikesville.org.
Okay.
There's the Pikesville Armory Foundation.org. There is the Pikesville Revitalization Action Committee that they can try to get. Well, yeah, it is. And that is the plan. The Pikesville Revitalization Action Plan Committee is in charge of implementing that, remember we talked about the revitalization plan, or Pikesville, or they can contact Mel Mintz at Comcast.net. I don't really care.
Whoa! Man's email on the thing, melmintz at Comcast.net, or start with a website. Start with 1,000 Friends of Pikesville.
Yeah, if you can.
Lots of different ways to do that. So before we let you go, Melvin G. Mintz, we want to first of all say how much fun and what a delight you have been to tummel with me here in the neighborhood, to go schmaying over various...
Schmaying, Rabbi, get it straight here. Schmaying.
Well, I'm a glitz, maybe you're a litbach. I can't tell.
Obviously, there's a difference.
So let me ask you: do you and your lovely wife, do you go on vacations? Do you stay put? What do you do in your golden?
We spend some significant time in Florida, and that's where I am right now. Of course,
you do. Yes.
And no, we don't travel quite so much as we used to, and but we did go to Italy with our kids and the grandkids, and we went to Israel a few years ago with our kids. And we went to Masada and we looked at it and says, that's crazy. Masada is just insane. When you think about it, it's just insane. And so we went to, I'll give you an anecdote. We went to the Golan Heights. And we're looking out over the valley, being guided by a member of the Israel Defense Forces. And he's taking us for a guide, looking out over the Bekaa Valley under the Golan Heights. And the guide says, do you realize there are 10,000 Arab militia groups in that valley, and they all hate each other? It sums up the whole craziness in a nutshell.
Which is a good thing, because if they all work together, we'd be stooped. But the fact that they all kill each other
there's a great line. There's a great line from Dennis Miller. Great line. He says, let me sum up the Mideast situation. I want you to all imagine that the situation is reversed. By that, I mean, imagine there are 6 million Arabs surrounded by 250 million Jews. Do you think for one moment one of those Jews would strap dynamite to their chest to blow themselves up over those 6 million Arabs? They would say, "Lazim, gay," and
it's true. Let them have their falafels. The falafels are good. I know I'm being racist.
That's true.
But still, and you know what we also love? We love Melvin G. Mintz. You. By the way, I'm so thrilled that you're in such great health. That you're so.
Thanks God.
Thank you, Mel Mintz. I wish
you're quite welcome. It's good chatting with you. Good having a little laugh or two. It's always a pleasure. Anytime we'll do it again, and we'll talk about some other shtick.
You got it. Azis almost Pesach to you, and all.
Azis in Pesach.
And shalom.
All right. Bye. Shalom. Thank you, pal. Bye-bye now.
Oh, Melvin Mintz in the neighborhood, my friends. What delight. Do you see why we have him behind us on the wall here? Do you see why we wanted him on the program? Just the word I should have said. His name should be Melvin Mensch. That's what, or Mensch G. Mintz, or Menschy, something like that. But Mensch should be in there, because what a fine person, and what a well-spoken and fun and totally and a Jewish person. It's all good.